I'm still using Twitter. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, God. I have a Tumblr.
I have a Tumblr too, but I don't share it because that's just where I go to be excited that Alex Hirsch came back after 10 years to confirm that my headcanon was correct.
I love that. In my defense, I have a Tumblr account.
Hello and welcome to Chatty AF, the Anime Feminist podcast. This is our wrap-up for the summer 2024 season, where we look back at the shows that were, as well as sequels and carryovers from the rest from this season or from spring. My name is Vrai. I'm the daily operations manager here at AniFem. You can find me on Blue Sky sometimes at WriterVry, and with me today are Caitlin and Peter.
Hello, I'm Caitlin. I do stuff on occasion for Anime Feminist. And I write reviews at Anime News Network. This season I'm going to be covering Ranma and Yakuza Fiancé, so enjoy that.
And I'm Peter Phobian. I'm an editor at Anime Feminist, and I'm Peter Phobian on Blue Sky.
If you've never joined us for one of our seasonal podcasts before, what we do is we use our Premiere Digest. We keep that static because shows will obviously move up and down in how they're handling things, how well they do things, if new caveats come up as they continue to air. But that would be a major headache to continue updating. So just for ease of reference, we go with the list as it's established after the premieres. And discuss new information as it comes up. We start at the bottom and come up, and then at the end of the podcast, we will cover our sequels and carryovers. I think it's also worth acknowledging that this season, wrapping up this season, is a little bit weird, because we did lose Nicholas Dupree very suddenly and tragically, and he was a major and beloved part of the anime criticism community, and he is extremely missed.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, if there's a little weirdness on this one, we're sorry about that. All right, we, as always, we invite you to look back at our 3-episode check-ins and our mid-season. We will try not to linger too long on shows if we already sort of talked a lot about them in the mid-season and not a lot has changed. Peter, did you finish No Longer Allowed in Another World? Did it do anything interesting at the end?
I finished it. I don't think it really did anything that would surprise or excite anyone if they weren't interested in the initial premise of him making jokes about wanting to kill himself all the time.
Nope.
All right.
Hardly at all. All right, VTuber Legend, we're going to pass over mostly because Chiaki will be recommending it at our end of season, because she, I think, really clicked with those big gay disaster streamers, and it seems like it really, really worked for her, and we spent a fair amount of time on it on the mid-season, so look forward to that, folks at home. The next show up is Pseudo-Harem, which Chiaki did leave some notes for. I will quote from her here. So, this show turned out to be really earnest, straight up having a first ending with a climax and credit roll in episode 7. The show was kind of sweet and playful up till then, but the romance factor gets elevated to equal footing and enjoyable for me as Eiji enrolls in college and continues to date Rin as she finishes out high school. There's nothing all that surprising about it, but it's got a nice ending, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Also, as a plural person, although Rin isn't actually plural, it's fun to have a tinge of that in the reading. I felt this when Eiji decided to break up with his harem to focus on Rin herself, and she chides him that all her personalities have become a part of her. She proceeds to go on a date where she refuses to be her normal self and date Eiji as her various other personas throughout the day. I know it's all done with acting on her part, but it holds parallels to how I am sometimes. So that's, cool. It seems like a pretty mid-tier but enjoyable rom-com at the end of the day. And that's
pretty shocking, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I guess those 4 coma work out sometimes.
Mm.
Yeah.
All right. I will step back from that and allow you to get your feelings out about the elusive samurai.
I mean, I don't actually have a ton to say about it. For the purposes of this podcast, I really liked it. I am hoping and praying that it doesn't end up descending into shonen mush. It's a really, really good looking show. Good action. It introduces a teenage character who's older than the rest of the what's the group called?
The Elusive Warriors.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's older than the other Elusive Warriors, and he's got kind of the team mom kind of vibe. Like, he's spent a lot of time, like, basically taking care of a village of children whose parents were all murdered. But other than that, I don't really have a whole ton to go into about it. Peter, maybe you've got some more thoughts about things to discuss with it.
I think we kind of just discussed at length the show's various virtues in the last podcast. And, I mean, it's still going strong that it's got a gorgeous adaptation. The characters are very charming. It mixes in a lot of humor along with some extreme violence. These kids are cutting adults' heads off, and there's a lot of blood during fights. But it's kind of, especially, I guess, in the later half, it's something to discuss is how it's able to kind of keep the tone lighthearted while not shying away from the reality of the violence they're forced to commit whatsoever, and the violence of the era. Even, it's tongue-in-cheek about the sport where they used to shoot dogs with blunted arrows. It's when it just comes to violence, it plays it pretty straight, which I respect. I also like Fubuki, and I'm disappointed that it ended just before Ayako's arc, but I guess that's something to look forward to since they already announced season 2.
So if you were enjoying Sengoku Yoko and want more historical shonen, or you're waiting for Hell's Paradise to come back, this might be one to look into. Right. We talked a fair bit about Alya sometimes hides her feelings in Russian on the mid-season. Alex left some notes about their thoughts, and from the looks of things, they have dropped it since then. So I guess it didn't improve. Peter, do you have any last thoughts?
I feel like it just kind of had a non-ending. The show is really the Yuki show, and it kind of ends with like them having a thing to determine who gets to be the next student council president, an election arc. I can't imagine anyone being interested in it at all. The appeal of the show is really kind of just the hijinks between Yuki and Alya being tsundere. And even Alya's stuff is wearing thin, since it's just, I guess, the author obviously knows what they're doing with Yuki more. Once again, a season 2 has been announced. I wonder if they will have any actual narrative movement in that one, because this one they just kind of found a stopping point and stopped it. And that's all.
Mm-hmm. So I guess Pseudo-Harem ended up the stronger het rom-com of this season.
Oh my god, maybe. Yeah.
Yes, there we go. Sometimes things are weird.
Yeah, it was a pretty gay season.
Yeah,
to be honest. It's
good to eat. Caitlin, you got all the way to the end of Shoshimin, How to Become Ordinary. Was it good all the way through?
I honestly, I don't know how I feel. So the last arc is about Osanai taking Jogoro around to all of these different dessert shops for summer vacation. And then it culminates with her being kidnapped by these girls in her class. And it turns out that it was all kind of plotted by her. It definitely kind of brings through that whole idea where it's like, yeah, Osanai is actually pretty fucked up. She does not play around when she wants to get to someone. She's actually really determined and creative about it. It was a little strange the way they went about it. I don't know. The last episode was a while ago, since it's a short series, so I'm trying to remember my feelings about it. To be honest, I had a really hard time absorbing the last episode because I really, really don't like Osanai's voice actor, which I talked about in our mid-season check-in. She's very breathy. She kind of, uses that like very like high-pitched feminine voice. She doesn't modulate a lot, even when she's kind of going into that whole like, oh yeah, you got me, like the whole parlor room scene sort of thing. Like she doesn't really change her performance for it. So I just find it like maybe it's misogyny. I don't know. I have a really hard time like staying engaged when I'm listening to a monologue specifically in that kind of tone. It's just not easy for me to listen to.
I mean, I guess it says something that it's been, and in fairness, a lot has happened, but that it's been 2 weeks and you've already kind of forgotten the finale. That sort of says something in itself.
It ended early. It was only
right.
10
You said it was
episodes,
11.
so
10.
It's been nearly a month.
Okay, fair dues to it. We'll say mixed to positive, and maybe check in on it when it gets its. Do you want to watch its sequel?
I'm really bad at watching sequels, even of shows I like. We'll see what that season is like.
There we go. And I mean, for what it's worth, the folks in our Discord, which you can join by going to patreon.com/animefeminist for $5 a month, the folks who were following it seemed to really enjoy it all the way to the end. So, for what that's worth, which is not nothing. Did Ossan Adventurer do anything interesting for the rest of its runtime?
Nah. They just had a big duel. At the end, he fought his mentor, whatever demon that everyone's trying to defeat. At the end, doesn't even make an appearance. So maybe they'll continue it later, but it just was like, okay.
It just stopped.
Yeah.
And Nokotan is still a shitpost show?
Yeah, it's not funny. I don't know what to say.
No, just if the humor works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, there's nothing there for you.
Yeah. Yep.
So watch
Same
one
with
episode.
VTuber, to be honest. that was kind of my feeling toward VTuber.
All right, Alex actually finished out Dahlia in Bloom, and they left some extra notes on the finale. To quote them, "My favorite bits of this show are when Dahlia and Wolf are nerding out together about the logistics of making magic gadgets, often with him gushing over how clever she is and making sure she gets appropriate recognition for her skills. They maintain a really nice, platonic, but could be more chemistry throughout the show. The show overall, though, isn't much to write home about. It still looks really stiff. There are long, dull stretches that just aren't engaging to watch. And while there are some nice moments, Dahlia herself doesn't really feel like a particularly strongly written protagonist. I think I can hand the mic to Vrai, to reiterate their statement from last time that if this concept sounds interesting to you, you might be better off checking out the source material, since that won't have the animation issues, and you can engage with it more at your own pace."
The weird shadows.
Moment of silence for Dahlia in Bloom, yet another in the long, long line of good Josemuke source material absolutely wrecked by projects without enough resources. Silence. Sadness.
Would you say it was underwatered? It was not planted in fertile ground.
Withered on the vine.
Withered on the vine,
there
perhaps.
We go. All right, I'm going to put you in bad joke jail now. Sit and think about what you've done.
Oh.
So, Suicide Squad Isekai. I didn't talk about it the mid-season, and frankly, I have very little more to talk about it now. Honestly, it's on me for putting it so high up the list, thinking that it might actually engage with some of the theoretical themes that were present in the premise. Because this show is not interested in doing that at all. It looks pretty. It has some fun one-liners, some cool action scenes. It has no thoughts in its head whatsoever. There's sort of a limp girl boss type plot with the princess that's kind of nothing. There's an incredibly stupid and contrived plot twist at the very last minute to get the Joker in there because must have more Joker. I would say this is more of a Deadpool 2 than Birds of Prey situation. Like, it held my attention, but I wouldn't like say if you're interested in it, don't watch it. This is very still a 90s Batman animated type Harley, although really underplaying the abuse elements. She's like a fun sidekick character who's having an adventure on her own, as it were. And that's fun, but not anything particularly groundbreaking with her. Yeah, it's head empty, no thoughts, brr. And it was only 10 episodes.
It's here for a good time, not a long time. In both that it is a short series, and also you will not be thinking about it for very long afterwards.
Mm-hmm. I think one of our contributors and a member of the Discord, Caitlin Donovan, did a write-up for this show on her blog, Lady Love and Justice, that summed it up pretty well, so shout out to that. And let's move on from it and not think about it anymore. Senpai is an Otokonoko. Caitlin, do you want to talk? I need to take a drink of water.
So I have not actually watched the last episode yet. I hit a point in Persona 3 that was really dealing with a lot of feelings that I've been needing to deal with. Which, speaking of, this was one of Nick's shows on Anime News Network. So, miss you, buddy. Rebecca ended up having to write the last episode summary.
Yeah.
You know, I feel pretty secure that my assessment early on was pretty accurate, that it was going to be about 3 kids figuring themselves out, figuring each other out, figuring themselves out in the context of their relationships with one another, I should say. And that sometimes it would be messy. And that's fine because identity is messy. The show hasn't really touched since we last checked in on kind of Saki's potentially Aro Ace elements. Apparently there's going to be a movie, so maybe it'll talk about that then. I haven't seen the last episode where Makoto comes out to their mom.
It's this show is definitely quite a spoiler alert. This is one we'll have another write up, so folks can check back then. But yeah, it's definitely heavy, especially the stuff with Makoto and their mom. So just watch your headspace when you're watching it, even though it's often very gentle and sweet and funny. Yeah, it can get rough.
Yeah, I was thinking about partially the arc where Ryuji and Makoto tried dating. And Ryuji, after a couple of dates, breaks up with Makoto, being like, I'm kind of feel like I'm gross doing this, don't you? And it's crushing to Makoto because I don't think they did feel like it was gross necessarily. But it was kind of touching on how, like, figuring out your identity is a process, embracing yourself is a process. You have so many societal messages to try to sort through.
Yeah, Ryuji's his internalized homophobia is heartbreaking, and there's really nobody in show to reassure him at any point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really appreciated how it didn't present it as shaming him. It didn't present it as he needs to get it figured out right away, or that Makoto was just okay with it right away. What he said was really hurtful to Makoto. And it is something that he needs to work through. But it's also not his fault that he's feeling this way. And I think that is really, it's heartrending, but it's also very beautiful in how real it is.
Yeah, I think this show doesn't necessarily have the level of deftness as Shimanami Tasogare, Our Dreams at Dusk, which I think is pretty much the king of intercommunity struggles, the manga. But I think it is reaching for the same place of like how things I think a lot of us wish we could see more in anime, where you know multiple characters who are marginalized in different ways, having the hedgehog's dilemma, basically.
Yeah.
Struggling, sometimes figuring out your shit will clash with other people figuring out their shit, and neither of you are necessarily wrong, but you've still hurt each other, and that's nice to see. It's a good show, and I'm looking forward to the movie. I'm not entirely sure the movie will cover the whole comic. I know there are 10 volumes serialized, but it looks, I don't know, just looking at the list of chapters that haven't been bound yet, it looks like it could be as many as 12. Chiaki would know better than me. So we'll see. I think it'll probably at least reach a nice conclusion.
My guess would be that the movie is going to be focused primarily on Saki's family situation.
Yeah, they do sort of leave that off.
Yeah, that didn't really get a lot of resolution in the show. And I really like how it's handling it, because absent parents is another messy situation. It is like, we don't know what the whole deal with her mom is. Her dad is just not a good parent. He's not a bad guy, but he is not someone who should be raising a child on his own. I don't know. Her mom definitely has the vibe of just like, there's something really wrong here. And that's why her grandmother is coming down so hard on like, no, you don't, like, please don't do it. Even though Saki needs to, she's going to get hurt, but she needs to face that. And yeah, so I'm definitely looking forward to the movie and seeing how all that shakes out.
How about MakeIne, which I will continue to pronounce wrong, I'm sure. Too Many Losing Heroines. Both of you watched this. How did it go? Well, I hear.
I mean, it's my favorite show of the season. It's really good. I don't really usually like this kind of show, but it's just brings me so much delight every week. I think part of it is that while Nukumizu is, he has questionable taste in light novels, and he's kind of a gloomy guy. He's never like shitty to the girls. Like, I feel like in Monogatari, yeah, I mean, we all know that Araragi sucks, right? This is just widely known.
Yeah.
The other one that comes to mind is like, God, what is the really bad English
Bunny
title?
Girl Senpai.
Rascal doesn't dream of Bunny Girl Senpai.
Yeah.
What an awful title, by the way. Just terrible translation. Anyway, I haven't watched it, but I know that in the first episode he makes a remark about a girl being cranky because she's on her period, and that sucks.
I don't like that series. It wishes it's we have Monogatari at home. Anyway, moving on.
Anyway, Nukumizu is not that kind of guy. He still has a personality. He has enough personality of his own. The one who in the series who is kind of shitty and selfish is Anna, the main girl. But Nukumizu, they all have relationships with each other. It's not just Nukumizu being a void of all of these girls being drawn straight to him. The girls like make friends with each other, and they support each other as well as him supporting them. It's stunningly animated, which does can make the difference between a pretty good series and a great series, especially when you have stuff that involves a lot of character acting. Yeah. Peter, do you have any thoughts?
I think I just kind of agree. I do like that they kind of, you're correct, like he doesn't, I think it is, in most cases the writer would have sort of made the social group revolve around Nukumizu, but they've done a good job of making it so that he is a friend within a group, so that it doesn't feel like all the girls are just radiating toward him for no reason. I like that they're just sort of a support group of people whose high school romances really didn't work out well for them. Mm-hmm. And but on the other hand, it also makes sure not to make any of them like a perfect victim. So you can see that, you know, all of them are weird or shitty or some combination of weird and shitty, as most teenagers are, so that it doesn't seem like they, fate has put upon them that they don't get the love life that they deserved or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So
and all the winning heroines are great.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, it's.
I love spending time with them. Mm-hmm. Every time Anna's friends, Karen and what's his name are on screen, it's hilarious how there is a run-on gag that those two are constantly fucking. Mm-hmm. They're just like so horny for each other, and Anna is horrified. And I love it because A, it's really funny. Just consistently just super funny. B, it's an acknowledgement that, like, hey, teens who are dating have sex. And it is a strike against the sexlessness that I have complained about in anime quite frequently. It's fun. Oh, and the last episode was great. The anime original last episode.
In which those two are shown dual filleting an ice cream cone. Yes. Yeah. I do think that that's the other component. Yeah, the other, it's not like the people who they didn't end up with are jerks either, but you can also see the way in which, like, even though those people are good people and you're a good person, or the main girls are good people also, hanging around the romantic couple can be intolerable, sort of necessitating that they find a friends group where they can just not have to be constantly afraid of being traumatized by seeing the person they like sucking down an ice cream cone with another person or something. So, and I think that's good because, in a lot of other high school rom-coms of this type, you would see just the person, the Ossan and Najimi, who doesn't end up with the main character, just kind of passively accepts their fate and hangs out with them anyway, even while they're obviously doing romantic things with their what do you ever call the actual love interest of the story, which is nice because usually all you're left to do is feel sorry for those characters and admire how passively they're willing to accept being in the presence of their constant a reminder of their failure to get the thing they wanted most.
They've come to root for them.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have a climactic scene where the childhood friend is like, like Anna does in the first episode. You gave so much for this love. You can't give up on them. And, that's that. Oh, it's supposed to be that she's totally cool with it now, but that's not how feelings work.
Especially teenage feelings.
Yeah, I also really liked the arc with Lemon and I can't remember any of the boys' names, but Lemon and Chihiro, where Lemon's like going and hanging out with him, and Chihiro is like, I'm fine with it. I just want him to be happy. I'm cool. Also, I'm doing all of this very elaborate spycraft trying to catch up with them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And it's such a very like balanced sort of like, I want to be okay with it, but I'm not okay with it. And I'm totally cool with their friends, but also I know that she has feelings for him. So I'm not actually totally cool with it, but I want to be okay with it because she's nice. I'm nice. She's nice. What should be the problem here? There shouldn't be, but also I don't feel okay about it. And I just really appreciated that like it was able to kind of go into those feelings, and even without like having like a bunch of like explicit declarations of like that's what she's feeling about it. Like you can infer it from the dialogue and from the story. And you know, I love a show that has faith in its audience and intelligence. It acknowledges that you can feel a lot of different ways, and it's not tidy, and in the end they get it figured out, and Chiro is delightful. Love that all of the girls are Fujoshi in that, by the way.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Except for Anna, who's the most normal girl in the world.
Somehow. Yeah. It really captures the kind of the humor and the tragedy of the human condition. that being our inability to control our own emotions and act irrational.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Is this one getting a continuation, or is it just like nice and concluded?
I don't think they've announced anything, but I would be shocked if they didn't, because
Same.
the novels are still going, and it was assuming it's not just my bubble.
It was popular.
It is popular. Okay.
Yep.
Well, because like here's the thing, light novel fans love it, but also people who don't like light novels, myself included, also really loved it. It's a crossover hit between those two groups.
That's a little bit everything is either a potato or not a potato, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, listen, it's not often that friend of the site Frog and I agree about a light novel.
That's the real crossover, yeah.
Yeah.
If we can all agree, Frog was completely right about this one. Yeah.
All right, rock on. So this might... this is the actual winner rom-com of the season.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
by a large margin.
The one where nobody gets a relationship they want. Yeah.
I am moving us on. To a show nobody watched but me, I think, because Aniplex. I don't know, Peter, am I wrong? Did other people besides me watch ATRI?
I don't believe it was very popular.
All right, then. So I did finish this one all the way out. It turned out better than I was expecting. I think it's still going to turn a lot of people off that it went the romance route. I will say it probably did the least bad version of the romance between this 17, 18-year-old boy and this robot who looks about 12. And, you know, was the one who saved him and when he was a child, and it's a whole thing. And she feels indebted to him because she was built for his mom. I still think that's conceptually extremely side-eye, because it's one of those, you know, well, you could have done anything and you chose to do it this way. That's always worth talking about when it comes to very young, very childlike characters as romantic heroines. I think that if we take that at its face, it's probably the most sexless version of the trope that you can get, which made it easier to power through all the way to the end. You know, they I was sort of bracing myself for, well, there won't be a sex scene in this anime, but if there was one in the visual novel, there'll be some kind of fade to black, and they veer away from that explicitly at a certain point in the story. And then when it starts to get into Nakige territory, it's a little bit cheesy. Not quite entirely what I was expecting. I'm just going to spoil this because nobody who isn't already a fan of the game is probably going to seek this out. So it turns out that his grandmother, who built ATRI the robot, was working on a series of on like this island project that would be a biodome, and she has a failing battery, ATRI does, but she was programmed to be the AI system to run this to run this biodome that would help revitalize the Earth. So, which means, you know, he won't be able to see her anymore, or she doesn't get in the pod and dies and forgets all about him anyway. I know, drama.
Tragedy.
I know. So sad. So, they part and he goes off to become a scientist. I will say a lot of what I liked in the first couple episodes was how it dealt with the sort of post-apocalyptic climate change stuff. That really gets lost in the sauce once it starts going into the romance, do robots feelings thing, which is pretty basic in most respects and not very interesting, except that I did enjoy the main character and failed childhood friend, speaking of having a conversation where he's like, well, how do I know if she feels anything about me? She's a robot, that she's just doing what she's just following her programming and predicting the response that she wants me to hear. and
she's just a large language model.
And his friend is like, well, that's kind of like what I do as a human. Like, aren't we all just sort of calculating inputs and trying to modulate a response? And I don't know, as a neurodivergent person, I sort of enjoyed that.
Sorry.
It's okay. Like that sort of idea isn't the whole do robots have a heart thing kind of stupid when you get to a certain level of contact and interpersonal relationship. Like, aren't we all sort of just evaluating stimuli at a certain point if you have all these other data points, that this person is clearly experiencing joy and sorrow? Doesn't matter if it's quote unquote real. And yeah, I don't think it meshes quite well to talk about it with AI data language models. This is a little more her.
So the Chinese room kind of situation.
And the epilogue is kind of nice, where, we blast forward like 3 generations and finally Earth has revitalized itself enough that this first island doesn't need to be online anymore. And it turns out that in the she'll only have 1 day left to live once she pops out of that pod, but he's built a neural network where her data can exist and uploaded himself, and then they both exist there, and both of their avatars are children, forever going to see his mom. And I thought, oh, this is schmaltzy, but it's kind of cute. ATRI is sort of like a show of sort of middling ideas executed very prettily. Middling and sometimes very frustrating ideas. I don't know that I recommend it to people because, like I said, the most interesting things about it, sort of the environmental stuff and the disability stuff, is doesn't really make it all the way through to the end as strong themes, but it definitely ended better than I thought it would when I hit that midpoint. So, yeah. Let's talk about Twilight Out of Focus, which I'm behind on because I like the manga, so I got lazy about following the anime, but you finished it.
I did. So, did you read in the manga up to the point where the anime ended?
I think so. I've read the first 3 volumes. So I think, yeah.
So where did the 3 volumes end?
So the first volume is like the first 4 episodes, which, by the way, I think is probably the anime's greatest weak point, is that you can tell this series was a one-shot that grew legs. So the first 4 episodes kind of complete, and then it has to start back up again. But so the first volume is their first love story, and then the second volume is the club president's sort of B-side story, and then the third volume comes back to Mao. I gotta say, the anime is doing a heroic job. I sort of assumed they would just cut them and have like a fade to black, but I think they're doing their damnedest to preserve those character moments of intimacy and weave in the sort of, I will give them the grace of assuming, like, deliberately sort of studentish cinematographic language without, we can't show dicks, which is fine, I think. I do think it loses a little bit of the sensuality of the art of the manga, which it's a little bit freer to express because it doesn't have to worry about broadcast standards, but I think the emotional core of it translates really well, and I really applaud them for trying to walk that line, honestly.
Yeah, because here's the thing that a lot of the Puritans on social media won't tell you. Sex scenes are important to character building quite often. And here they're very important. You know, they are presented as major moments in their relationships. They are a time where they are figuring out their feelings for each other. They are discovering new sides to themselves as they have these first experiences. The sex scenes are extremely important in forming their relationships, which I love. I think that's great. I should probably check out the manga because I do really enjoy like a really good like character driven sex scene. Also, you know, it is just sexy. Like, I'm gonna get canceled for, oh no, I'm reading sex scenes about teenagers. Oh well.
I strongly believe in the assuming they're 18 rule with series like this.
I mean, I just at some point I stopped caring. It is like the question, is this feminist or not, is just not it's not an interesting conversation to me. You know, as long as they don't look like blatantly underage, or it's not like there's not like, you know, crappy relationship dynamics, because it still remains that, you know, my kink is a healthy relationship with good communication between people that love each other. You know, and I mean, that's, you know, and that's my personal taste. But as long as, you know, it is not like blatantly got the stuff that I don't like, or it's not like blatantly like child characters, it's all good. Just roll with it.
I think that's a deeper conversation than we have time to get into on this
podcast. Yeah, but whatever.
Yeah, no,
anyway.
It's I think, you know, Tony has brought this up in the past, and they're right that like there is this sort of issue with with a lot of really good recent BL that it's also very G-rated. Like given the TV series Sasamiya are both very like, they're not getting any further than their first kiss in those series, and they're very good and emotional, but you know, sometimes also queer people would like to have sexy content that is sexy. It just, I don't know, I think it's good. I think it's worth checking out as long as slice of life high school romance is your thing. And you don't mind that it does have a little bit of that stop-start pacing because of the nature of how the manga was serialized. So it kind of draws to close and then picks back up again, and then but it's good. All right, I am going to move us on to Narenare Cheer for You, which, if ATRI is a show of middling to bad ideas executed beautifully, Narenare is a series full of good ideas executed middling to badly. I compared it in the mid-season to Action Heroine Cheer Fruits. And boy, does that continue strongly, because that is also a series that I didn't end up recommending on the site. You know, spoilers for this. Because I really liked the things it was doing well, but ultimately those things got dragged down by these long stretches in the middle where it was just doing club show things and not particularly well, and its messages kind of got muddled in the middle. Like, there's a lot of really strong content in here. You know, we have the heroine, the main character throughout, is dealing with the yips, and like that's a persistent issue for her character dramatically. She goes to see a doctor regularly about it. It's very serious about it. You've got another character who is got a serious injury and uses a chair and is going through physical therapy, and that's an ongoing part of her character and her relationship to sports. It's very heartfelt about wanting to, you know, cheering as being there for your community and wanting to reach out to people around you, but it's also just kind of slipshod. It's got when I think about looking at it on paper, I can see how it all was a really good idea for a show that all came together and worked. As this idea of our main character was traumatized by this sports accident. She makes this club, and ultimately is able to sort of reconcile the trauma of that event and the other people who are traumatized by it as well. But it gets so lost in the weeds in the middle that by the time it comes back around to that plot, it's suddenly introduced a character in the 11th hour who we've seen once or twice in the background in the first half and then went away for most of it. So that totally fails to hit. The cheer sequences are really limited by the rigs and not even the rigs, the blocking and storyboarding that has to be done around the rigs. It ends up looking really flat. There's not a lot of dynamic movement and camera angle that they can do with it, and that's kind of a bummer that's in this series that's supposed to be so extremely about the athleticism and artistry of cheer and these other athletic traditions that have fed into it. The Yuri subtext in the two background characters goes a fat lot of nowhere. Like, I think you can interpret that they're dating, but we're confirming nothing, and also we dropped that plot thread halfway through, like so many other things. It's by far not the worst show that I've watched, even this season, but it's kind of a disappointment because PA Works is known for their high mark of quality, and this is just kind of confused, and I wish it had had longer in the cooker. And yeah, so that's that.
Not up to PA Works' usual standards.
Mm-hmm. Which is a shame, especially because it hits on a lot of themes and subjects that you don't see covered as often in anime. Although I'm told that Uma Musume's later seasons does do some pretty good stuff with sports injuries, according to D. So that's cool.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
It does.
Speaking of PA Works shows that could have been gayer.
Yeah.
MAYONAKA Punch. I liked it, but yeah, my point stands.
I do agree it could have been gayer. Now, I also think that this was a series that I ended up doing the last episode review in place of Nick because it was one of his series. It was also his pick for the best show of the year. So, you know, I have a lot of feelings tied up into it right now. Even though it's a goofy comedy, if it's still, you know, it is something that normally it would be something I would just be laughing about. So if I come across having my emotions around it are coming across kind of disjointed, that is why. So I just want to get that out there for the listening audience. So anyway, it could be gayer. Yes. Now, I do think that there are some implications that when they did their whole plan, the name that they came up with for this mysterious figure from lives past was I. Also, I'm very inconsistent with how I pronounce her name. Just roll with it. Anyway, you know, their name was I, which is a very feminine name. There were romantic implications. So it could have been gayer, yes, but I do think there is a good amount of subtext there.
Oh yeah, it's rich in subtext. Men don't matter.
I really like how it concluded, actually, with the whole plot and the fact that the big thing that had Live remembering Masaki and like craving her blood was that in a fit, it was so anticlimactic. It was just like the last thing in the show. In a fit of rebellion, Live is just like, fuck this. I'm going outside. I want to go in the sunlight. This is bullshit. Goes out in the sunlight, gets her shit wrecked, falls down as a bat. Little 5-year-old Masaki comes along and is like, oh, what's this? live bites her, and it's the last taste of blood she had before falling asleep for 20 years. And that's it. That's it. You know, a lot of people were just like, that's so anticlimactic. I'm like, but that is so in spirit with the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I appreciate the throwing away of it like that. I think everybody was really moved by Fu's backstory episode, and I feel like that threw off the calibration for the rest of the show. Because that one is really quite sincere, and then everybody else has, like, comedy tragic backstories. And you're like, okay, but where's the... But I did a cry.
I mean, Ichiko's backstory is still pretty...
I mean, it's sad, but it's, like, the imagery and the level of it is kind of silly. Like, with the old-timey peasant clothes and the...
They went silly with the bells.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was kind of like the what is it, the match-selling girl type background or something. You're just like, wow, this is saccharine.
Uh-huh.
To the point where it's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, so, like, you have that episode really on that's, like, very Zombieland saga, and then the rest of the show isn't really doing that, which is fine. That's a perfectly valid choice for the comedy, and I think it's often very funny. But I don't think one can blame the viewers for having been set up for another emotional experience to some extent. It's kind of like... I watched this show with my partner because, of course, I did. It's gay vampires. And they brought up a really interesting point that, you know, the event that kicks off the series is Masaki punching one of her collaborators, and that's treated as a serious thing, not unjustifiably. And, you know, the ways in which Masaki is a shit and digging herself in deeper with this. And then, you know, the rest of the series is sort of about the way that trauma lingers with her, and there's kind of some nice closure in the finale where she talks about, like, yeah, I fucked up, and I can't just make it better with this one live stream, and I appreciated all that. But there is sort of this element in the same way as with, like, Fu's backstory versus the rest of the girls. You know, you have this very serious episode where we're meant to take the punch seriously and the fallout of it seriously, but then the rest of the show takes place in, like, vampire slapstick wacky land where characters punch each other around no problem all the time. So because that's the reality that we're living in, it, I think, very unintentionally creates this dichotomy where it's not just that Masaki is being traumatized by these people who, by the fact that there are people who like to jump on the bandwagon later because, you know, it's fun, but it starts to, at a certain point, make them feel like, oh, well, they overreacted in the first place because we're seeing all this cartoon violence all the time. It's not a big deal. You know, it starts to diminish the fact that it kind of was a big deal, this culmination of this thing she did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that.
And, like, I do, I think it's a very good show. It's a very funny, creative, beautiful show that has a lot to say about social media and working online. And that, I think it's probably struck one of the better balances between talking about how it can be stressful to be an influencer without going over into, you know, the woke agenda canceled me on the internets, and there's rawr about it. So I think I point out the inconsistencies like this because I think in many ways it elevates itself very highly otherwise.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I didn't really think about that, I guess, because I mean, I'm not saying this in like, well, I am smarter than everyone, but because I do kind of like, I am trained to kind of automatically create that separation between this is slapstick violence and this is, you know, violence that is being treated seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I think that media trains us for that, whether or not that is something that is right or correct. So yeah, so it didn't bother me.
Oh yeah.
I think that as people who create content online who I don't think anyone of us has fucked up in the way that Masaki has. Right? Like, you know.
No, but you work on the internet long enough, you will fuck up. And
yeah,
I think we've all been there.
Up. Yes, we've all been there. You know, I don't need to start citing specific examples. Like, you know, we all have done it. And so seeing Masaki go through that process of like, well, now what's next is really interesting, and figuring out that like how much do I care? How much do I say, well, fuck them? I can't just say, well, fuck them, because that's my audience, and I can't just alienate everyone. But also, like, some people are commenting in bad faith. That encounter with the girl at the bathhouse where the girl's like, I'm such a big fan, and then she's out there like just glibly starting shit online because she doesn't really realize what she is saying, the kind of impact it's having. I think that really rang very true.
Yeah, because it's very easy to say, oh, well, you should just say, well, fuck them. But no, like, sometimes you did fuck up, and you need to address that, and people are telling you things you need to hear and respond to. And then sometimes also, after you've heard the things you need to hear and respond to, it continues to happen for 3 more months because people are discovering it for the first time.
And people treat it like this one mistake is that alone is a whole picture of who you are, or that it is building an accurate picture of what you think and what you believe. And it's not necessarily, it's just that, but also you fucked up. I love that this show is like, it's both a fuck up, you fuck up and you face the consequences, but also like people are so shitty about it and it really fucks with your head. And it's just like, it's not just one or the other. Both things are true. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think when Mayopan is cooking, it is some really good stuff. Like, and I think it's an easy, I don't know if I'd pick it as my best of the year, but I think it is an easy recommendation as a very gifted, good show. All right, so Dead Demons, Destruction, I am not going to talk about here because we did an entire retrospective about it. I know my audio on it is kind of shitty. Sorry, I have a new mic now. But yeah, it is, what I will say about it.
Don't they sound so much better, folks?
Yay! It's a very, very good show that I think was severely slept on. But not to say, and you didn't watch it and you're bad people. I think it wasn't really very well advertised. It dropped at a weird time. It's heavy subject matter. But it's an excellent show about sort of an everyday apocalypse and the sort of both complicity and atrocities that we have, living in
society.
In society, and
we
in
live
a turbulent
in a society.
time. We do live in a society, I think, that you'll find. But also just the sort of the ways we need to cope, to just be normal to cope, when the world is horrifying. I think that it delves into very dark subject matter, while keeping a certain amount of levity and care for characters that you can invest in and want to see do well, and that the narrative wants to see do well also. It's also pretty gay. So yeah, I really don't know how better to sell it to you than that, but that probably says more about my taste. It's a very, very good show, and I will say, if you watch it, do not watch episode 0. Watch episodes 1 through 16. That's a complete, contiguous story. Episodes 0 and 17 are meant to be watched one right after the other, and because of some of the changes from the manga, I think don't fit in as well with the anime adaptation, but are kind of interesting. Listen to the retrospective for more. All right. We are going to make a quick dash through the sequels. Oh god. Oh god, this is just going to be me talking more, isn't it?
Could be.
It is.
Chime in occasionally.
MONOGATARI Off and Monster Season will not be eligible for a recommendation this season because it is still ongoing, but Tony, our resident Monogatari enjoyer, did leave me some notes about it, so I will quote them here. ANFM resident Monogatari appreciator here. Monogatari off-season and monster season is fantastic. I'm so happy to have our favorite autistic-coded corpse Ononoki back to replace Araragi as the girl helper-in-chief, especially as her dynamic with both Nadeko and Tsukiki is truly delightful. This season bears more similarities to Monogatari's second season than just Araragi being put on a bus. They're both deeply meditative turns for the series as they bring on a new creative team and focus in on the girls' relationships with each other and allow them to reflect on their journeys and come to form some sort of self-actualization. Sorry, folks, I ran out of tea. Similar to Itamura's entrance in the second season, our new director, Yoshizawa Midori, takes confident control of the reins of the behemoth to lend her distinctively experimental and baroque style to this entry of the series, and having a woman in the director's chair, for the first time, could not be more important to this particular set of stories. Similar to Hanakawa in Tsubasa Tiger, our formerly fetishized by the camera Nadeko has to confront her own tendencies towards dissociation and running away from parts of herself that are angrier, hornier, and generally messier. While Nadeko has been one of my favorite characters by far since the Nadeko Medusa, seeing her reflect on how all those messy characters she once was were necessary steps to get to the place she is, and that she will continue to change was deeply satisfying. But the real crown jewel of this core is Shinobu's backstory arc, Shinobu Gourmet, which uses a fairy tale structure reminiscent of Hans Christian Andersen by way of Undead Murder Farce and Ikuhara, to tell a gothic lesbian vampire story that is both campy and delightfully tropey, but also exquisitely rendered in shot composition, animation, and storytelling. There were several moments I teared up during this arc. Much of that credit goes to Yoshizawa Midori for this, as her innovative storyboards, often using silhouettes, extremely abstract imagery, and just plain badass ways of looking at women, along with the huge step up in animation that came this season compared to the borderline slideshow quality of previous seasons, has made Monogatari once again a pleasure to behold. Even the re-entrance of Araragi back into the narrative couldn't ruin the show for me, largely because there is no fan service to be found. Monogatari has changed, y'all, but it's still here and still going strong. Long live the former harem show that will never end. I look forward to getting there someday, but, I have to suffer through Nisei Monogatari first. We'll enjoy that next year, folks. Alright, next we are going to talk about Oshinoko's second season, which I believe I am the only one who watched. Yes?
I fell down on that one.
It's okay. I think this will probably show up on the recommendations. I'm sort of waffling about it now because of spoilers from later in the manga, but I think I'm going to end up doing it because I think this show is still so good when it's doing entertainment industry stuff. It's not as probably sharp-toothed as the first season is, but it's also, in that vein, not as irresponsible as the dating show arc ended up being. We have an article about that, by the way. I think it's more just in the vein of, this is interesting backstage information about sort of how, in this case, the creation of a 2.5D stage play works, sort of, the backstage dealings when it comes to casting, competition between actors. I really loved that Kana and Akane get to go full glass mask this arc. That run of episodes was just a delight to roll around in for me. I also really liked that Aqua is a character this season as opposed to a vehicle for shitty monologues where he knows more than all of the other characters. I think it's really helped by the fact that other characters sort of have a grasp on him and have expertise in things that he doesn't. And also, the show is explicitly dealing with the fact, and even name drops the fact, so, golf clap for that he has PTSD and a panic disorder because of witnessing his mom's murder, as you would. So I think he is able to be more of a flawed character that I can root for, and that, doesn't just feel like our dude protagonist that all the women are swooning for, although we'll come back to that. There's also a lot of just good stuff with the secondary characters, male and female. Ruby kind of gets put on a bus until the last couple episodes, but in fairness, the finale does really set up for the next arc to give her a lot to do, so that made me a little bit more okay with it. There are some really, really beautiful experimental sequences, when it's personifying these big long monologues about the artistic process and what it means to be an artist and yada yada and so forth, and I am an absolute sucker for that stuff. I know that this season's production was a lot more troubled than the first season, but honestly, the show did itself. It told me what it was doing on screen with the characters, and then it did it. It focused on the parts it could do really well and that it cared the most about, which was the stuff on stage. And it absolutely nailed those bits such that I didn't mind so much when corners had to be cut in other areas. I will say that this second season really makes it stark how bad this series is at romance. All the characters become actively worse whenever the romantic subplots come around. The best parts of Kana and Akane's arc is getting to do their glass mask rivalry stuff. The season starts out really leaning into heavily how they don't like each other because Kana's got feelings for Aqua. And it's almost like halfway through the season, the show realizes it's doing that and shifts away to like this much more complicated discussion of their sort of animus toward each other because they have different philosophies about acting and also this past history with each other. That's a lot more interesting. But those early scenes just flatten Kana out to being this very paper thin tsundere that's not the interesting character that I know she can be in her best moments. She goes on a date with Aqua at one point, and the post-play part of this season is frustrating because a lot of those episodes were really and the end of the first season even, were really emphasizing that Aqua is becoming mentally like a 17-year-old, and a separate person, basically, from Goro, the guy he was in his previous life. And then we come back to the romantic subplot, and all of a sudden we're back to emphasizing how he was actually like an adult 30-year-old man who knows how to plan a date, and Kana is griping about how everybody's all into gender equality now because she secretly wants Aqua to pay for them at their date. And I'm like, I die. Oh, so actually this is it really is reminiscent of the worst parts of Kaguya-sama, and kind of makes me think in hindsight that Akasaka kind of has a low-key gender essentialist view of romance, and a very childish one, and it's just that Kaguya-sama happens to take place in a very childish but playful framework that covers up a lot of his weaknesses, but they look real bad here in this serious, dramatic entertainment thriller. And yeah, this also means we have to come back to Ruby still having her feelings for Sensei from her previous life, and that sucks. And it's just like the looming sword of Damocles. And I've complained about these elements a lot, because they're so glaring when they do pop up, and they make such inconsistencies of the characters, but the rest of the stuff is so good, like either insightful or pulpy when it's not insightful, and so clearly beautifully made by the production team that I'm still here. I'm still gonna power through what I know is coming next season. So yeah. That's Oshinoko is still doing what it does. Oh, the new opening and ending are vastly inferior to the first season, but how do you compete with Idol and Queen Bee?
Mephisto was an incredible song.
It was so good. All right, is Yatagarasu Core 2 the only other sequel that we are talking about? I believe. Am I missing one?
I believe that's it.
All right. then it's still me talking, except it is Alex through me, because they finished this up and left notes. So to quote, as I said when covering this last season, the ladies are the element of the show that I'm most interested in, so unfortunately, I consider the second core of Yatagarasu a massive downgrade because they're barely in it. While I'm happy that my favorite, Lady Amayu, gets some screen time being cool as hell at court, it's tiny compared to how the new plotline overwhelmingly focuses on the dudes. Said new plotline is about the kingdom being invaded by ferocious flesh-eating monkeys who turn into people, as opposed to the main characters who are crows who turn into people. And I'm not sure how deep to read into that, but depicting foreigners or outsiders as savage and animalistic in comparison to the civilized locals is an existing trope and a whole uncomfortable thing. So, overall, this one still has interesting elements and some moments of compelling political drama, but lost me in a big way in part 2. Which is kind of the bummer. That's one that I absolutely had to, wasn't able to fit in to the schedule. See also part 2 of the Nier Automata anime, which I'm going to hopefully finish in time.
Which has been marked oops on the screen.
Yep.
On the spreadsheet.
Yep. Just marked oops. Oops, I didn't do that. Oops, I meant to do that and I did not do that. The plan is to hopefully get it done, and I assume if it continues on like it has, it will pop up in the recommendations list, but I'm sorry, I don't have anything for you right now.
Rip.
All right.
But you know what? We did it. I'm very proud of us.
That's it.
There was a lot of anime this season, and we're already deep into the mires of fall. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, AniFam. If you liked this, you can find more from the team by going to animefeminist.com. If you really liked it, consider throwing us a couple bucks, either on our Patreon, patreon.com/animefeminist, where you can get a monthly subscription with some bonuses, or if you just want to toss us a one-off, we have ko-fi.com/animefeminist, which is where we pay for one-off projects, where right now, incidentally, have you ever wanted us to do a 3-episode check-in of every show in the season, and not just the ones we found most interested? You can do that, if we can fund it. We are happy to do that for you. You can also find us across the socials by looking at our Linktree, linktr.ee/animefeminist. Thank you so much, AniFam. We're sorry that this was kind of weird. We're kind of sad. But we love you, and we hope that you're taking care of each other. All right? Be well.